work, has been working with social movements and आंदोलन्स for quite a while. आप में से कई साथी उनको जानते भी हैं. जैसे आते ही रोहित भाई ने बोला, हाँ मतलब गुजरात में हमारे साथ काम करते थे, अभी हमारे साथ प्रफुल्ला दा भी हैं, मीरा भी, ऐसे बहुत साथी जुड़े हैं, सीनियर साथी जुड़े हैं. सो वी वेरी वेरी हैप्पी दैट ऐसा हमारा एक कोशिश शुरू हुआ था पिछले महीने से कि हफ्ते में 2 हफ्ते में एक बार ऐसा छोटा बातचीत रख के. वैसे स्थिति अभी बहुत बुरा है देश भर में, स्वास्थ्य को लेके और स्वास्थ्य के कारण को लेके. जिस तरीके से स्टेट का एक क्लैम्पडाउन भी हो रहा है अलग अलग जगहों में लोगों के ऊपर, तो उस चीजों को भी एंड अनुपम वर्क जो है ज्यादातर एनवायरनमेंट के ऊपर भी रहा है. एंड उसके दौरान जिस तरीके से मानव अधिकार का खनन होता है या ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशन होता है, उसके ऊपर भी उन्होंने बहुत बहुत लिखा भी है और टॉक्स भी दिया है. तो अनुपम एज अ जर्नलिस्ट, आई थिंक दैट इज एन इंट्रोडक्शन इन इटसेल्फ. एंड डाउन टू अर्थ, और अभी इंडिपेंडेंट तरीके से गुवाहाटी से वो काम करते आ रहे हैं. So since we already have exceeded the time, I think we can just go straight into the talk. तो अनुपम का सुझाव था एक बातचीत के तौर पे इस कॉन्वर्सेशन को रखे. ऐसे नहीं कि एक 1 आवर के लिए वक्ता जो है वो बोलेंगे और बातचीत हम शुरू करेंगे. उसके बदले he will speak for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can open up the conversation. एक मुद्दे के ऊपर थोड़ा देर बात करके उसके बाद उसके ऊपर चर्चा करके, and then we go on to the next issue. So ऐसे एक phases में हम इस conversation को आगे लेके जाएंगे. So welcome once again, welcome everyone to this conversation. Anupam, over to you.
Shall we start? Shall I start? Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are safe. Times are difficult, and I just hope that you are taking care of yourself and taking care of people around you. So I just heard Ashwati mentioning Rohit Bhai, and it's really good to see Rohit Bhai here because I'm going to, I think, begin this discussion from where I actually began my journey into, reporting about environment. And Rohit Bhai was one of those people who actually led me. I could not travel with him much, but the little that I saw, I think that was for me a trigger to start thinking more about what it all means and the work. So that was way back in 2008 or 9 when I was in Gujarat, in Baroda, reporting with Indian Express. What I'm going to be talking about is about dilution of environmental laws and the impacts that we are kind of seeing now. Or we've been seeing this for a while, but now it's more acute, or now it's more in front of us. And there is obviously this element of pandemic added to it, because pandemic is completely changing things on an everyday basis. And as there are sort of more environmental impacts, more climatic or even human induced impacts, which are more anthropogenic in nature, we see that pandemic also is one of the factors. And while I see that the state should have been more considerate, understanding towards these impacts during this time of pandemic, this calamity, the state has actually it's even more difficult for people who are in the margins or who are facing these impacts, because the state is actually accelerating the works that it is already doing. And with that, I want to begin with what I started in good, like I started understanding in Gujarat, which is basically the idea of, the extremely critically polluted clusters in India. And I was in middle of, I was in central Gujarat, surrounded by three of the, biggest critically polluted clusters. There was still a Congress government in the center, and BJP, of course, was ruling in Gujarat with Narendra Modi as the CM. And what we saw, uh, that increasingly, I mean, whenever the issues of this critical pollution, or water pollution, or the issues related to Bhopal waste, because there was a talk of bringing Bhopal waste to Gujarat for incineration. So whenever these issues were being discussed, we would see that, both, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's just BJP, but even Congress also, like, uh, shirking off, or like it's not really taking the responsibility uh, of the impacts, or of the impacts of pollution, which could be seen over the 2 decades of industrial growth in Gujarat. So I would rather start with Narendra Modi's home state and then move on to, examples from the place where I am working. So that's why I'm starting with the CEPI index, which is the Comprehensive Environment Pollution Index. I won't go into the history of it, but very shortly, this is the index that tells you how badly polluted one area is. And it had basically distributed the country into small clusters, and smaller big clusters. And you could also, I mean, look at, they were also collecting data from the health indices of the people, like health impacts, or what the hospitals were giving, and other things. So the first thing that happens in 2014, I would cut to 2014 because before that the struggle was somewhat different. 2014 onwards, by 15th, I think the first dilution happened to the CEPI. I'm hoping Rohit Bhai would correct me if I'm dithering or going somewhere else. So the first dilutions happened in 2014, when they say that, health surveys, or the health impact or environmental impact, they need not be included in this particular assessment of critically polluted clusters. So that was, of course, people started, I mean, there were lots of letters and everything being written, because already what we see, like even before 2007, that places like Vapi or Ankleshwar or Vadodara or in Ahmedabad, uh, the pollution of water bodies, rivers, were at a crazy level. I mean, if you would, the way water pollution, how does one measure water pollution? You look at, the amount of availability of oxygen to the aquatic beings which are there, like both flora and fauna, or you look at the presence of, various kinds of chemicals in the water and their levels. So those, when the treatment, so there were treatment facilities being set up all across Gujarat. Whether they were working or not, that's again another separate debate itself. But we see that, whenever there were, whenever through an RTI, or through, after writing letters to various, treatment, effluent treatment organizations, you would get results which showed that, these levels of pollutions were way off the mark, like way above everything, and it was being indiscriminately being dumped in various parts of Gujarat. And I mean, apart from, like, say dumping illegally, they would also, the companies were also, I think, using reverse boring to dump the chemicals back into the back into subsurface, back into earth. So then on top of that, they were also discharging the same chemicals into the water bodies and the sea, the Arabian Sea. So what we see is that, the first thing that happens is that they revised the guideline for SEPI, and they stopped like including health and environmental impact on in that. So they would just go by the discharge norms. And somehow uh, I had read what Rohit Bhai had written earlier, that somehow the results of this or the criticality of this particular cluster which is polluted, that part is dependent on how much it, these industries could treat, how much of the waste that these industries could treat, rather than what the overall indicators were saying. So very soon we see that chemical COD norms, those were being revised also. Earlier it was 250 milligram per liter. It was increased to 500 milligram per liter, you know. So that was the norm. So from a lesser quantity of COD, it was revised to 500 mg. So this is again very crucial for this is again very crucial for all the aquatic living beings. Now, uh, what we see is that the impacts. I mean, even when I was there, we were traveling to say Valsad or Vapi, and we would see that vast areas would have like these small tar balls being washed on the shore. I mean, apart from the, all kinds of like colors and different like, uh, I mean, what Rohit Bhai also talks about is the Coca-Cola discharge, basically. So all the water, the discharge water from these effluent treatment plants. I mean, after coming out from a treatment plant, the water would appear as Coca-Cola. I mean, the color is of that, coffee colored water. So that is coming out of these treatment plants and being dumped into sea, to common water bodies and things like that. And then as we started traveling around, we saw that areas which were producing uh, you know I mean, which are considered as vegetable basket of that particular area. For Baroda, there is this region called Padra and Luna, which used to produce a wide varieties of like vegetable, would supply that. They started seeing these impacts, like they couldn't dig up a well next to their or in their areas. And as soon as if you are doing any kind of boring activity, it will the bore would just throw up the same Coca-Cola water from these wells. And it came down to this, that in even in 2011, collectors, I mean, this is again, I'm talking about the sea pollution, because they were dumping this waste into the sea. And the Arabian Sea was getting very badly polluted. I mean, all kinds of things were being said also at that point of time, that the concentration, the sea, the impact of the sea is far greater, so it would lessen the impact of this pollution, and it will sort of get treated on its own and things like that. But that really never happened. So what happened was that we would see collector of Valsad issuing an advisory saying that this water is not fit for, the sea water is not fit for any kind of fishing activity. So then every year I would hear about stories. I'd written also about it, that fishermen from that entire South Gujarat coast would move to Porbandar, where there are maybe now, with the industrial development that is going on now, there are industries in that region also. But at that point of time, there were very few industries, apart from what the Alang shipyard did. So they would go to Porbandar, Okha, or to Jamnagar to for fishing. So this migration keeps happening continuously. So that was one of the things. Then yeah, this activity of these small tar balls, because of presence of various kinds of oils in the sea, these tar balls would wash up in the sea beaches around Valsad and Daman. And that's not being changed. It's still going on. and it's probably like even more also. I keep seeing the videos that Rohit bhai has been sharing in his Facebook page, and I would urge all of you to also follow these updates, because here you would see that how basically how acute the problem of pollution has become in Gujarat, the water pollution, and how state authorities have been completely have been completely ignoring this kind of pollution that is that we are seeing in Gujarat. And it has all, I mean, if you are looking at the pandemic, how the pandemic sort of impacted the state, it's very visible that people's health indicators, there are so many comorbidities also when you see that. So that all points to the large scale pollution which is taking place in Gujarat. I mean, I won't go into the details of it, but a little bit of digging, or little bit of going through the local news, you will get to know that more people are dying because of comorbidities, and comorbidities are because of the pollution, the water pollution mostly in that state. So that is one of the things. And then I mean, I also, from this same thing, from the critically polluted clusters, what we also see is that there's an overall increase in the number of accidents, okay, which is happening across the country. I mean, there is I was going through this Geneva Waste Federation of Unions industry all, and they came up with some very interesting statistics. Um, one of which says, and this is like around the lockdown time, uh, what we see is that between the months of January and August alone in 2020, there have been at least 55 serious industrial accidents that have claimed lives of over 120 people. So this is between January and August in 2020. Then about the LG Polymers case in Vizag. Then you know, there was another leak on 29th, also on June 29th, that resulted in death of two workers. Then in Navali Lignite Corporation, there was a boiler explosion that killed like about 6 workers, injured about 17 of them. Then in various places in Ghaziabad, also a candle factory went up in flames and things like that. And we see again, like as I was, the theme of this whole thing is that, what happens uh, from say 2014 onwards, when Modi government comes into power, we see 8,000 workplace accidents, which has killed over 6,300 workers in India between 2014 and 2017. I have not gone beyond 17 because this is the data set that I have. So from critically polluted clusters, the industries located within these critically polluted clusters. So it is not only polluting uh, the area around it, these industries, because of the lack of these laws related to governing these clusters, or the dilution that has happened, but it's also killing people inside these factories. So what's going on in these factories? Uh, this is I can see that there are some comments also which are coming on. I'll be addressing them a bit later. So I mean, all these things kind of point out that you know since the very start of this new regime, of this new Modi led regime, we uh, we are seeing not only an increase in the pollution, but also in the industrial accidents. So there's something really wrong with this entire model of promoting ease of doing business. What are you easing then? Are you easing are you easing, or are you creating an environment where accidents can happen every day? Or are you also creating an environment where the pollution is completely like cannot be arrested by any means? So this is one thing, one section that I wanted to talk about. And this is related to the CP index. I can take a question at this point or move to my next section little later. I mean, it depends on the moderator. So what do you guys suggest?
Anupam, I think, yeah, we can take some questions, or if you want to comment on the chat.
Yeah, sure, sure. How do I, so some comments were being made. I saw, one moment. I
So,
saw it in the chat.
yeah, Professor
Uh,
Srinivas is saying that how come technocrats, bureaucrats, judiciary, the press, and policymakers are quiet when this is happening in Gujarat, the native state of Prime Minister? So, what is the nexus over here that everyone is quiet about this level of pollution and the
yeah.
existence of the problem in the industrial belts of Gujarat? And what about
Thank you, Professor Srinivasan. Um this is, of course, I mean, it's not quiet or something like that. It's just that, how basically as a media person, I can say that how the news is being sort of planned and broadcast across the nation about this. I mean, I have been referring to Rohit Bhai's work off and on, and Rohit Bhai has been, not just Rohit Bhai, there are a whole bunch of activists actually in Gujarat who have been talking about, uh, most of them have been talking about these this kind of pollution, have been filing RTIs. This we would write news. There are reporters who had come after me also. There are reporters from other publications also, from English as well as Gujarati media, who have written extensively on that. So and like what I would again urge you, that you should follow Rohit Bhai on his Facebook and get this kind of news or updates from him, because it's also important that I mean, what we see is that there is definitely some kind of erosion. I mean, there's some kind of like mistrust with the conventional media that is around. So by all means, if you're interested, you should follow these pages. Follow Rohit Bhai on Facebook, and a whole bunch of you can also put like Google alerts also for Gujarat pollution. You'll keep getting those news updates. So a few things, and you should be able to get. It's not like it's not been reported. They make it to small single columns, but it's reported, and that's how I can sort of come and bring those figures to you. um, what about the opposition parties in Gujarat? Well, to a certain extent, opposition in Gujarat in 2007 itself, we kind of saw that they were not really effective. I mean, some of them were hand in glove with the industry associations. I mean, when it comes to buckling under the industry associations who were demanding uh, that SEPI should be revised or should be relaxed, both Congress government and BJP government have sort of like allowed that. Yeah, at this point of time, Rahul Gandhi might be talking, sorry, in a very different in a very different language, but I mean, this has been even Bharuch MP, he's no more now. Uh, Ahmed Patel, in his constituency, there were massive violations uh, by the polluters, and it was being also pointed out to Patel and his the people around him, uh, and there was hardly anything that was being done to that. So I can see another question by Ishika Kundu. Most of the workers that are killed, I guess, are
Sorry,
informal contract
Anupam,
workers.
just to intervene, I think we can go
Yeah,
to the questions a little later. If you can stick to the
yeah.
format that you had decided, no? Like of going, because I think you have a presentation in mind, and if we go to these questions right away, probably that flow, you lose that flow. So because you were also, you started with the Gujarat, your experience of working with Gujarat. Uh, so do you want to move to the next session and then come back to some of these questions, or otherwise? Unless there are questions specific to whatever you said, I
Yeah.
think we can move on to the next portion of your presentation.
Yeah, sure. I can move to the next portion also. I'll come back to these questions once I'm done with all the
Yeah.
sections actually.
Yes.
That
I
will
think that'll be
be,
better.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. So, so yeah, moving on to the next section. Just give me a second. Yeah. So next thing, like I'm now shifting the focus to the area where I live actually, which is Assam. And I haven't been going out of Assam so much and reporting from there, like what I have been sort of like seeing in Assam. And what I mean, what it sort of, it's like a mini model for a lot of things which are happening around the country. So I'm sure you'll be able to relate to it. And during the discussion, you can, when I talk about these things, you can probably like chip in and, tell me the similar examples which you have noticed in your areas. So the second section is that, industries next to the critically endangered habitats of forest dependent peoples, people who depend on forests and who live very close to ecologically sensitive biome, there, how these areas are being impacted by industries. Now, you might you some of you already know that Assam is, there's quite a bit of biodiversity and wildlife and stuff. And it's really big on, conservation and all that, home to one horn rhinos and things like that. Now I'm seeing this other side of Assam, like as I travel through these areas, like, I see that, there is an increase in the industrial activities such as mining and oil extraction right next to the national parks in Assam. I mean, it was there earlier also. It's not like it has happened now, but in the last, say, about 8 we that we see that, there is definitely an acceleration in the way industrial activities and such as mining and oil extraction has taken place. So you might you might see, media reports talking about these big ticket wildlife and NGOs like WWF, talking about these great examples of conservation, which is like mostly like about like a marginal increase in the tiger population or, a rhino population. But largely in Assam, conservation rhetoric stays away from national parks, which are faced with large scale encroachments by industries. I mean, there has, you will see that, when some incident happens or when there is an accident or something like that, immediately Facebook would erupt with like people commenting and writing poetry, song, everything. But then that dies also a very quick death. This is what I've been witnessing since last year. So, I mean, what we don't do here, is that, we don't look at what are the ground realities, what are the ground facts, what are the laws. When I'll come to the example that I'm going to take, but you all know about eco-sensitive zones, which are, these buffer zones next to a wildlife sanctuary or a national park. National parks are supposed to have it as per a Supreme Court judgment. Now, I mean, ideally, there should not be any industrial activities. Even like having a hotel or large resorts are also like not allowed. That we don't, like in Assam, it's a very different kind of a situation. Even a place like Kaziranga, which is hailed as this great conservation, experiment and all that, you will see that large amounts of lands just next to Kaziranga being devoted to tourism industry complex, which has its own impacts. I mean, they encroach upon the, the wildlife movement areas and things like that. Um, what about the rights of the communities who are dependent? So again, around Kaziranga, around these extremely ecologically biodiverse areas, you see that there are communities which live there along with these areas. I mean, they depend on the forest, they collect their forest produce, they use a portion of the forest. They know, they are the ones who can possibly tell you more about, the movements of elephants or movements of animals. But their understanding is completely undermined. They're not taken, their idea of conservation or their idea of coexistence is summarily rejected by big ticket NGOs. I mean, they will say that, we are doing this something in partnership with the local community, but that's just like a model, what you have model village and all that. So eco-sensitive zones similarly are violated by industries also in Assam. The case in point is, I don't know how many of you know about this area called Dibru Saikma National Park, but it's like it's become a sort of a hotbed for all sorts of violations. I mean, this it's an island basically, and it's a very recent island. uh, it's an island on Brahmaputra river, and you know so basically Brahmaputra has two banks, North Bank and South Bank. At some point in the past, it was attached to the south bank of Brahmaputra, and then slowly after the earthquakes and all that, the this particular landmass started moving towards north, and the river keeps shifting every year, and eroding portions of it and things like that. But it also is the home to two very important clusters of this scheduled tribe called the missing community. And there are about 12,000 people who are, or who have been coexisting along with with the animals there. What we see is that in around 2000, uh, I mean, people started talking about, like, it was already a wildlife sanctuary. So then, let's upgrade it to a national park. It gets a national park status. But then, obviously, like across India, we did not know, or there were no, I mean, although there was a push from a very significant section of environmentalists as well as wildlife conservationists to have like a buffer zone, there were no buffer zones at that point of time. But that did not mean that, if there's a national park, you could set up a oil well right next to it. I mean, there were still laws that could, you would still need permissions, like, a Water Act, or under Air Act, or consent to establish, consent to operate, and things like that. Now, those permissions were never sought. And Oil India Limited, which is a public sector company, started, these installing these oil wells right next to the national park. 2002, 3, first oil wells start coming up. Then there is no requirement. There were no permissions being taken also, even though it's there on, I mean, by law, by the rules that we follow, by constitution, we are supposed to take all these permissions. So they set up the oil well. It was only in 2020 that, we get to know there was a lot of local protest. By we mean, like, these urban are us, like we live in urban areas and we are sort of not really aware of what's going on. So we see that a blowout takes place in one of the oil wells right next to the to a water body. And this particular water body, in this particular water body, uh, it's considered as a very is as a, birding habitat also. And I mean, birds from all across, like Europe, and from tundra and everything, they come here, and they basically come during the winters. So there's no absolute regard for, like, any of these, and they set up the oil wells. The oil well experiences a blowout. The blowout uh, is followed by the oil would, it's the oil had spilled over a big section of area. It has spilled into the water bodies from this blowout. And then on June 9th, this thing catches fire. So a large area was devastated, including this particular, eco-sensitive area also. And there are about 10,000 people, mostly belonging to Adivasi, Moran community, scheduled tribe community, and quite a few Assamese, speaking people. They get displaced and they are shifted to the relief camp. This is at the height of the pandemic, when infections are rising in Assam, and cases are going up. There have been deaths also reported. This particular incident happens, and people are forced into schools which double up as relief camps. Initially, there is complete denial from the state authorities. They say that no, it's just 500 people, who have been displaced. And then obviously some journalists reach the ground. There are also people from within the government who say that no, it's a lot more. So we see that finally this entire thing turns into a big NGT petition, big NGT case. And then the case goes on till like last March, when one of the committees which was being appointed to look at the impacts, to look at who's responsible for this blowout, and how these permissions were, like, they had completely laid bare that all sorts of violations had happened. I mean, starting from this particular thing, I'm talking about eco-sensitive zones. So you prepare for all the national parks, you prepare eco-sensitive zones which are supposed to be around it, and there should be a radius of, if it is not as per the Supreme Court judgment, if the state government has not been able to determine as to how big this eco-sensitive zone is, Supreme Court would say that, make 10 kilometers, make 10-kilometer radius, 10 kilometers from the core zone as an eco-sensitive zone. But in case of Dibru Saikhwa, in certain places, there is no eco-sensitive zone where there is an oil well. So the eco-sensitive zone is actually, inside the core area of the wildlife. If we mapped it, because we used the coordinates by which they got this clearance, and they said that this is the particular eco-sensitive zone. So in that notification, you see that we get the geo coordinates. So we started mapping it, and then in one of the places we mapped the core area. And sorry,
Yes, Madam.
shall I continue?
I muted the...
Yeah, please go ahead. Somebody had unmuted. Yes, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so what we see, like, we started mapping this area, and we found that using these geo coordinates, that in one of the places, the eco-sensitive zone is going inside the core area. So what should have been a buffer zone is actually inside the core zone of the national park. And then you see that there are oil wells right next to it. I mean, it's there on record. It has been approved by the ministry also, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So this is done by a bureaucrat, a same wildlife officer who becomes an investigating officer about the impacts that the wildlife sanctuary had after the blowout. So he's the one who prepared the eco-sensitive zone, and now he's the one who's investigating the impacts of the blowout. So on asking these questions, you see that there are no replies, but what you see is that this particular official who had helped this company in securing this kind of permissions, who is promoted, and this post of chief wildlife warden is created, a post which remains vacant for 15 years in Assam. Now suddenly we have a chief wildlife warden, and he is the one now who's calling all the shots on all the eco-sensitive zones which are being planned across Assam in various national parks and stuff. So this is then then we also see that the National Green Tribunal, which appointed a committee of a retired judge and which laid bare so many violations by the by the oil companies. That committee is completely dissolved. The committee is asked that why don't you uh, submit why don't you submit the findings to this another three new committees. These three new committees will decide where what kind of impacts were there, and then people were handed some kind of compensation also. It's not like they were not compensated, but very few got it. And those who actually, uh, to be honest, who conducted very violent protests, they were the ones who were compensated. People who did peaceful protests in this area called Bagjan, they never got any money even till date. So it'll be 1 year on May 27th since the blowout. So these three new committees which have come now to investigate this violation of eco-sensitive zone and other such things. In one of the committee, Oil India Limited has been made the main investigator in that. The MD of Oil India Limited is the main investigation officer. And very surprisingly, this was not, challenged also. So we see that on multiple levels, this kind of violations have happened. Then even outside the protected areas, even outside, national parks and sanctuaries, the state government or the forest department does not want to sort of, admit that there are people living right next to eco-sensitive zones or elephant habitats. You all know that this is a very recent thing. I think it's been about 10 days now. 10 days, yeah. So 12th May, night of the 12th May, this herd of elephants, they of them, like some 18 elephants die because of a lightning strike. It's called, officially it's called lightning strike. We still, people are completely confused. There are contradictory evidences all around, you know but what we see is that there's a solar power plant that is coming up. This is again, just I'm sorry, I'll just locate the place for you first. So this is in a place called Nagaon. Now Nagaon is basically, one part of Nagaon is like, right next to the Brahmaputra river, and a good portion of it is like, considered as floodplain. But the other half is close to hilly terrain, and this hilly terrain is Karbi Anglong, which is an autonomous council area. So the incident happens in this place called Mikir Bamuni. Mikir Bamuni is a land which was, this is again, like, it's coming from the British colonial times. This land was given as a grant to a family, to with, like, zero taxes or like various other things. So this family had like some 800 bighas of land, which would go to about, say, about 80 to 90 hectares of land. And over a period of time, uh, this family is sort of like, they obviously, like, there are over after independence, after the Land Sealing Act comes into being and everything, there are communities who are already dependent on the land. But this land also happens to be a elephant habitat, which I'll come to that point little later. But this particular struggle uh, is about a bunch of, like, Karbi, which is a tribe in Assam, and Adivasi families. Adivasi is mostly the tea, people who were at some point working in tea gardens, and then they have moved out and started doing their own farming. So this 287 bighas of land belong belongs to, this is where the farming was done by uh, by these Karbi and Adivasi families, and they had already secured the right to sort of cultivate this area. It's I mean we have a tenant, we have an act, which is the Land Tenancy Act, which is tenant sorry, the Tenancy Act of 1971, which gives that right to the farmers to, you know, continue cultivating areas. And then slowly, if in 3 or 4 years, if they can continuously cultivate that area, the land belongs to them. So they secured this right in 1981 itself. And what we notice is that in 2019, some from some through some means, the people who had this grant, who had you know, sort of like, who claimed that they own the land, they sold off this land to a Delhi based multinational company called Azure Power, and Azure Power decides to set up a solar power plant. And the solar power plant, you know, I mean, last year during the lockdown, suddenly people realized that their land is going to like be taken over by this solar company. And eventually, and then court cases follow. And in one of the petitions, they also cite that no, this area is also an elephant corridor. So forest department, then we find that there's a document that says that there's an NOC that has been given to this particular company. And on NOC, the no objection certificate is that the wildlife or the forest department company does not want to sort of does not regard this particular area as an elephant habitat or an elephant corridor, and permissions are being granted. So come to 12th. So on 12th May, what happens is, this is again like, you know, say 2-3 different accounts which had been shared uh, by the locals over there. That elephants actually came, they use that area where the solar power plant is coming up as a corridor to move to, you know, a stream, a water stream. And just on 12th May, on 10th May, uh, following, this is what the state claims, that following a high court order to maintain the status quo of law and order, they decide, the police decides to bring CRPF into picture. And the CRPF is suddenly posted next to this area where the supposed power plant is going to come up. And they start the construction. This is when the state government has issued an advisory saying that beyond 2 o'clock, there should not be any kind of, there's a curfew because of the pandemic. They start the construction. On 12th, this herd of elephants, 18 elephants consisting of 10 females, 3 calves, 5 you know, male elephants, they come in front of this particular Azure power plant's gate. And they had already lit up the place with floodlights and, you know, big torches and everything. So they start, you know, beating up this tin and start, like, you know, chasing the elephants away from that path that they use. These elephants go back and they start climbing a hill. On that hill, there was already a large scale, you know, log felling and tree felling that was being done by, you know, various kind of mafia which was there. So they climb that hill, which is completely like kind of like barren. And this is where, you know, it is allegedly now said that these elephants were electrocuted, or like they were struck by a lightning and they died. So once this question of, you know, these 18 elephants or this power project, I mean, there are very few journalists actually who are raising this question also. Everybody is hell-bent on proving that it was a lightning strike. Fine, it was a lightning strike. I mean, so what? There's a solar power plant which is coming up right next to that. And that solar power plant is blocking the access of the elephants to that particular, you know, where they usually stay. There's a forest department which is saying that there are no elephants. So uh, you know, so then I mean, so then it obviously means that these elephants were driven up that hill where they were struck by lightning. So then, is it really a natural phenomena that is at work? So there are these questions. So even outside protected areas, outside areas which are considered as which are not considered as ecologically sensitive. In Assam, we see that there's a large scale plan to divert this area. Now a friend of ours, her name is Vasundhara. She's also a part of this collective which actually investigated everything. Now she told me the other day that more than 800, actually it's not just 287 bighas of land. They're planning to divert this entire grant area, which is like about 900 bighas, to this to different industrial projects. So this was community land. This was a common land of the communities where they used to grow crops. They were in sync with the elephants coming from different parts. And now, without doing any kind of without settling the rights of the people, or even caring about the biodiversity of the area, the land is being transferred by the state. So this is, so this, with these two examples, I'm sure you will be able to relate to similar examples in your area where you live. And similar kind of diversions are taking place. So then there is a question here that that
Anupam, one second,
yeah,
because I think there are lots of questions and comments also coming in, and we also have a lot of community people, leaders and members from various sangatans also here, I guess. So
okay,
one thing that is common that is coming up in these, these comments are also, and from your conversations about the role of our understanding of conservation and renewable energy, right? Like, so when the country is also, the world is moving towards renewables, and there is a rampant insistence on conservation, the modes of conservation, and the dilution of law simultaneously happening for all these development projects by the central government, which is also implemented by the state government, and a lot of laws which are actually in contradiction with each other. How is it that, what are the ways in which some of these violations can be amplified? Either by journalists or, by journalists, probably you can talk a bit about that, but there is a way in which we have also worked with sangatans and movement groups and andolans. And
I was
actually, talk a bit about that, that'll be great.
I was actually planning to come back to that part. Just one sec. So do you want me to sort of address this particular thing right away, or should I move to the next section? I can address it right now itself.
It's okay. If you're coming back to that, then that's fine. I was just, because there was a link.
I was coming back to the movements also which are happening, but there is obviously see, there's an overwhelming some of these movements have a lot of ground support. I'll just touch upon it, and then I'll probably come back to it a little later. Some of these movements have also got very good ground support because of the organizations which are working, the individuals which are working, their consistent effort, but then say in Bagjan, where the oil blowout took place and all that, it's actually that area. One was that there are very few organizations which are working there. Two, they created a lot of inter-community conflicts also, which relates to compensation and stuff. So you'll see there's a variation there. In some places it works really well, organized movement or something like that. In some places which would seem very spontaneous, or would seem very sort of very, very intense movements, would suddenly lose their steam because of lack of organization and things like that. So I'll come back to that point. I'll move to my third section. I'm sorry, I'm just doing this in a very because there's a lot of things that I want to sort of talk about, but then there I have less time, and you all also have less time here. So I'll just quickly run through the sections, and then we can open this up for a longer conversation, right? So my third section that it pertains to like dilution of Forest Rights Act and the unwillingness to implement FRA. So I'm very sure that everybody, the all the sangatans which are present here and people who are sort of here, they know very basics of Forest Rights Act. I'm sure about that. So just to, I wanted to sort of like touch upon this point because it follows from the previous point that I was telling you about the Bagjan area where the blowout had taken place. So, I mean, very shortly, Forest Rights Act is considered as historic for the marginalized scheduled tribe communities and forest dwellers. And somehow this act was never sort of like approved by big ticket wildlife conservation agencies. Actually, they don't over the large, vast areas or the vast forests or jungles of India. Uh, so we see that, in some places there have been community-led wildlife and forest conservation and management efforts, and this has really, really worked out well for a lot of people. However, in India, despite having these regulations, the scheduled tribes and other forest dwellers continue to face evictions. And one of the most important things of Forest Rights Act is the key component, which is a key component, is the Community Forest Rights Act. So, I mean, if you look at, India's total forest area, it's about 34.6 million hectares of forests that we have. And this area is also recognized as an area which is potentially, which has the potential of being a community forest resource where community forest rights could be given. But of this 34.6 million hectares, only 1 million or even less than a million hectare has been recognized under the CFR. Where it has been recognized, it has worked wonders. But where there are lots of places that that the state government should have given this, these rights to. And when we see that over a period of time, the FRA has like been diluted with, the state versions of it, where the forest department becomes the main sanctioning authority or like main guarantor of these rights, when these rights nowhere actually factor the forest departments. Maharashtra was one of the key examples where they framed their own VFR rules under the BJP government. So, so that is a direct violation of FRA that we see under the BJP government. And then also non-implementation in itself is a big violation. When people are itself like, demanding that these rights be settled, their rights are not recognized. I'll come to this example that, about this two island in this particular Dibru Saikhowa National Park, where, almost 12,000 forest dwellers and people from scheduled tribe communities live. And after they declared this area as a national park, they did not bother to sort of resolve or even take care of, even respect their rights over this particular piece of land, and started evicting them. So this 3,000 people, I mean, when just to narrate this whole entire thing, this Dibru Saikhowa National Park, just after the Bagjan incident, where I was just talking about this oil disaster, this blowout that happened, the people who were living in this island, this Dibru Saikhowa National Park's the island, mostly from the missing community, they started, there was a talk that, very soon our area is going to be taken over by these oil wells. And if there's going to be pollution and all that, and already this national park is pushing us to pushing us beyond, taking over our lands and stuff. So they started this big exodus, and it is not for the first time. They had even tried earlier also, because their land rights were never settled. So these people started, they came and they camped outside the Tinsukia district collector's office and sorry, deputy commissioner's office, because here we have deputy commissioners. So they stayed there for close to a month. In this year's winter, a lot of women died. The a pregnant woman died, and there were also young people who were sick. And this is like, in the during the winters, when COVID was not gone from India, where they took this extreme risk of like coming and camping outside the DC's office and saying that we want our land rights. So then the state government stepped in and they said that, okay, we will take care of this and we will give you land. Then they started this survey. Then between three other places which were identified, the land wouldn't have been enough. And these people already, because the state government initially showing some kind of, promise that they will give the land to these people. Then they stopped. Then the election campaigning started in Assam. And then they completely forgot about it. And these people also, they went and started camping right outside the areas which were potentially, shown to them as, these areas where they can possibly stay. So this was completely unavoidable. I mean, even now, during this peak of pandemic, these people are staying in makeshift shelters in areas like Jagun and Tokopani, which is like, swarming with, security personnel and CRPF and stuff. And yeah, anyone could be picked up because of any other charge. There's also AFSPA in some of these areas. So in this situation of extreme insecurity, these people are camping outside, living in tents, thinking that the state government will resolve their rights. Why could not the state government, the question again comes, is that why couldn't the state government bring them under the FRA? There's the provisions of FRA exist for these people. The state government had said that we recognize FRA as as an instrument. Why can't their rights be settled under the FRA? Similarly, we look at Kaziranga also, which is, which started as a 400 kilometer square wildlife reserve, and now guess the sizes. It's gone. It's about 1,000 square kilometers, and it's a it's one of those areas where it's packed with people. There are communities and communities who live next to this park. And when there was this complete scope of resolving their, they are probably, like with the rest of the country, their rights also were needed to be resolved or recognized under the Forest Rights Act. Those were not recognized, and their areas are now being included under the new forest lands. And from 400 square kilometers, now it has become 1,000 square kilometer, wildlife conservation area, a sanctuary area, and with their rights never being settled and being evicted even during this peak of the lockdown. So these are cases where FRA could have been implemented by the state government, but then it's like, what I said earlier also, that not implementing it is also a violation of their rights. When there's a demand from the community, it's not just one scheduled tribe community. There are 2 or 3 scheduled tribe community. There's an Adivasi community. There are other forest dwellers. What Assam government did was, since 2012, calling it some kind of a, that these people, there were Muslims who were staying in that area, saying that these are people who are illegal immigrants. They evicted them when they have been staying in sync with this area for ages. Since 1960, there was a primary school in that area. And even then also they were evicted mercilessly. This year again, people were forced to evict themselves in some of these areas. Where have you heard that, that state government would come and tell one person staying right next to the park that, if you don't destroy your own house, we will come and we will not leave anything behind. So they had to like break down their own houses. So this happened in this year during the peak of the lockdown, when there is an already like uh, uh, an instrument of the state. There is Forest Rights Act that can ensure they can ensure that their rights are being resolved. So that is one of the things that we see. And then I mean, I'll move on to my next section, because I'm just going very quickly. This is the place where they undermine the this very act of like public consultation. That public consultation is not being taken into consideration while diverting areas from forest or from people, common areas to industries. So I mean, this section, the undermining public consultation, this talks about basically I'm talking about the fact that what Ashwati, you were also saying that what are these ground movements. So the ground movements also happen in anticipation. This is what I noticed in a lot of places across India. Communities anticipate the impact of large scale industrialization or big land change projects. And EIA 2020 has already made it clear that there would not be any kind of public consultation. So even with this, without this controversial notification, also BJP government had already diluted the public consultation process, and in some cases by citing national security and ease of doing business when it came to power. So we see that right after it had come to power, linear projects, which means roads, railways, pipelines within 100 kilometers from India's international borders, do not even have to go through the EIA process. This notification was brought out immediately after the government came into power. And this would also, I'll come to because I've been studying this, I have 2 or 3 friends who are in Uttarakhand and who have been sort of telling me about this Char Dham project, which has violated like a whole bunch of rules, and the kind of destruction it's causing in Uttarakhand, especially during the monsoon time, it's immense. So before I come to Char Dham project, I would also look at the projects which are coming, the dam projects which are coming in Siang area, Siang Basin, which is the main, the main sort of tributary that later, when it enters India, when it enters Assam, it becomes Brahmaputra. So this is a 10,000 or 10 gigawatt hydro power project that is being planned in Siang district. So when we traveled there, there was a widespread opposition, and this opposition could, 2 of these public consultation meeting, they just said that we do not want to be a part of this public consultation meeting because our voice together is a big resounding no to any big dam project in the Siang River. Despite that, in this Adi homeland, this year again, they are trying to revive this project. And the idea here is that, that with this 10,000 megawatt project, they will be able to counteract the impact of the Three Gorges Dam that is being built by China. They actually went and told the organization which is working there, the Siang Indigenous Farmers Organization. It's mainly comprised of, Adi is a community, a scheduled tribe community, and mainly tried to convince these Adi elders that, listen, we are building this dam because, once China builds their dam and China releases their water, your land is going to sink. So how will we protect that land? So we will also build another 10,000 gigawatt, 10,000 megawatt land. But then details of the project are quite crazy. You will see that, half of a district headquarter. Where have you seen? There are very few places where an entire district headquarter would get submerged by the waters of a dam. In this case, Inkyong is this district headquarter of Upper Siang. And this entire district headquarter would be submerged by this particular project if it comes into the place. People, Siang Indigenous Farmers Forum people, they are totally aware of this, and they said they, I mean, last time they actually chased out the dam officials. I mean, when we had visited the area, because they did not know us, so they initially thought, they thought that they did not know that we are journalists. So they thought that we are from the dam authority. So the first thing they came and they said that, don't even enter. If you're going to talk about the dam and if you're from the dam company, then just leave right now. So that is the kind of opposition that is there on the ground against this project. And these people, they now, when the Arunachal Pradesh hydropower division, they entered, they tried going and convincing again. They were shocked and they said that how could you even think that we would buy something like this from you, that you are trying to build another dam to counteract what China is building on Sangpo. How is that even possible? So the conversations did not go anywhere. They had actually called for a very big meeting in this month, but then due to pandemic, that obviously could not take place. But we see that here the entire public consultation process, I mean, what they have been saying also uh, from the beginning is that they don't wish to participate in the consultation process, because the answer is a big no. We don't want this dam. I mean, they don't even have to organize this meeting. Similarly, we see that, in Meghalaya also, they have revived a hydropower project, which was actually abandoned by a private company because they saw that there was a big opposition to that. And there was public consultation being held. And, at that point of time, I think 2006 or 7, the locals from that area, and this is on the river Umgot. Umgot is this, if you see, you might have seen these photos of is supposedly, Asia's cleanest river, where you can see the river bed. And this particular thing, river is like supposedly Asia's cleanest river and all that. And then this is where they are planning to build the dam. So when in the first round, when they said that they are going to build the dam, during the public consultation process, the community said no to it. This year again, now this has been brought under the state government, Meghalaya State Electricity Board, and they are again trying to revive the same project. So people said on April 8th and April 9th, I think, the community did not even like allow the public consultation process to happen, because they said that again, we have at one, what does it mean to have the same consultation once again in our area? So this entire thing of public consultation being undermined, and or taking community for granted and having another series of a new series of public consultation is totally against it. It violates the spirit by which this EIF process was there. I mean, at least for some projects. Now, of course, with the EI 2020, they are going to remove, for I think 40 different categories or something like that. They are going to remove the public consultation process, and the impacts are palpable, because I'll come to the impacts part. Public consultations are under which department? I'll come to that question, the answer later.
Anupam, can we wrap up in the next 5 minutes and then we can have a
yeah
discussion?
So basically this last part pertains to what is the impact of lack of public consultation. We see that in case of in Char Dham project, because there was no public consultation process, we see some crazy amounts of how basically how it is going to destroy this entire Kedarnath, Badrinath and that entire area. So this is a 12,000 crore pariyojana, that's what they claim, to improve the correct connectivity of pilgrimage centers in Himalaya. And the plan is to widen 890 kilometers of highways connecting pilgrimage sites like Badrinath, Kedarnath. Then you have Yamunotri, and there is this Pithoragarh side also for the Kailash Manasarovar Yatra. And this is supposed to be completed within December 2021, which will never happen, I suppose. It talks about removing 690 hectares of forests with 55,000 trees from the Himalayan. This is the area where land is scarce, and they are planning to remove 690 hectares, and they are also planning to remove 200 million cubic meters of soil. Soil is anyway, topsoil is anyway very, very less in the mountainous areas, and they're planning to remove that. So there was a high, without any consultation, the people were already angry, and one of the petitioners, Uma Joshi, she moved to the Supreme Court along with a few other petitioners, and Supreme Court formed a high-powered committee. So the high-powered committee has come up with the report. The report is scathing. It says that of the 174 slopes to be cut in the 160 slopes, meaning like they're going to cut a portion of the mountain, okay? And these portions are like 60 to 90 feet of mountain being cut. So they're saying that of the 174 slopes to be cut in 160 kilometer stretch on National Highway 125 between Tanakpur and Pithoragarh, 102 were failures, having turned out to be unstable, prone to landslides. By end of 2019, 44 slopes as in the slope right next to the road had failed along National Highway 125. Between April 2018 and April 2020, there have been 34 major landslides. And guess what happens in October 2019? Uma Joshi, who's the petitioner in the Supreme Court, she dies when a big boulder falls during a landslide. She had probably gone to see the impact of this kind of construction, and on her vehicle itself, a big boulder falls, and she falls inside fell inside a gorge, and she dies. So this is the kind of impact that we are talking about. And in the first 4 months of 2020, that is just before the beginning of this lockdown, one major slope failure, one major landslide every week. What happened?
Oh, I think there is some issue with Anupam's connection. Anupam, are you there? Power chala gaya shayad.
Yeah. It's not a power cut. Can you hear me though?
Yeah, we can.
We can hear you. Yes.
So I think it's something with the video. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so basically, this is what we saw. Now, this is the impact that I was talking about. That when you don't have public consultation, there was no consultation for this particular project. It was just pushed through the throat of. I'm trying to start my video, but it won't start. I don't know what happened. So this is, this is what the impact is all about. I mean, what we were talking about. And, when you don't have public consultation, and this is just a very, very small, tiny, tip of this large iceberg that is floating down from Antarctica and coming down, because there is no people are not kind of following on the process of public consultation, the process of SEPI, which talks about or the Forest Rights Act and other such things that I kind of discussed. So I think we can start the question answers round.
Hello, everyone. What we can do is, because we have too many questions on the chat, and the software, you have to scroll up a lot to reach there. What we can do is we can unmute, and then we can start one by one. So if you either raise your hand and then unmute. So Neha has raised her hand. So Neha can.
Yes, hello. Thank you for this talk. I have three questions. Uh, in Assam, you mentioned a lot of land that is being converted from forest, for the solar plants and oil wells. So, is there any legislation or policy or directive that allows these land use change policies? Like, is there a planning act or is there a regional planning act, uh, or is there any directive?
No, there is no
That
directive as such. I mean, you have to go.
Anupam,
Hello?
my suggestion would be let's take questions at least from 2-3 people, and then you can respond.
Okay,
to
okay.
me.
So I'm just
In case,
noting your
yeah,
questions.
just you can note
Is
these
there
down.
a land policy?
Yeah.
Is there a land use policy like change or whatever? Second was the public consultation comes under which department or which governance structure, administrative structure. And I just wanted to confirm whether this the public consultation has been removed from the FRA. Is that what you said? Is that what you meant?
Okay,
From the,
okay. I'll come back to it.
yeah. Thank you.
रोहित भाई आप बात कर लीजिएगा.
Wanted to get 1 minute to make one point with reference to Gujarat, which was talked about. So whenever it's convenient, I can come in. Not now. Let questions come in. I just wanted to address one question which was raised by whether litigation was filed in judiciary or not. So I just wanted to fill up that, what exactly happened. So if I can come in now, I can say now, or I can come later on also. It's fine.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So there are two things which is happening. When Anupam mentioned about Gujarat thing, the SAPI thing, the reports which people can look at is 2009 report. It's called Comprehensive Environmental Pollution Index. The report is 2009 report, where you can have an idea how reports are prepared, what are the calculations. Another is 2011, 13, and then the NDA government decided not to come out with the report. But later on, because of pressure from the various groups, the 2019 report came in. And if you just look at 2009 report and 19, is almost, you can see that there is no change. So that was one point which people can look at that. Second, because of the various things which was raised in Gujarat, the ultimately matter was filed in Supreme Court against 19th state of Gujarat, India. And in that, it was called Writ Petition Civil 375 of 2012. People can search the popularly known as PSS versus Union of India, Paryavaran Surasabhe. And that order is applicable all India. And the order is dated 22nd February 2017. And then Supreme Court asked, and that's about the pollution of water, whether it's the ground, surface, river, everything. And NGT was asked to monitor it. And NGT took up the matter. It's called Original Application 593 of 2017. And it says PSS versus Union of India. And it got disposed of recently by 22nd February 2021. And you can see that what even judiciary is doing. We have an order in front of us and we are unable to implement. And people like us are giving notice called contempt of the court, and nothing is happening on the ground. So we have a fantastic order which we can laminate and keep in our house, and we salute and we say that we won the battle in the court, but nothing on ground is still. That was only one point. And second, during pandemic, two things happened with reference to Gujarat in spite of Supreme Court order. The Vapi industrial estate, which was number 2 during 2009, polluted cluster of India, and 2011-13 become number 1. And that cluster, the association wrote later to the GPCB saying that allow us to dilute the norms because we are unable to meet the norms of the common effluent treatment plant. And that was official letter. Imagine in public domain, you can write such a letter. That was one. And the last point I wanted to mention about that, how state work in terms of policy. So people can read it to one article is called, one report called TSR Subramaniam Committee, where combination of act was thought of. And if you just read it, that report, that is exactly what is happening on the ground in terms of major changes. We started, which Anupam rightly said, 2015. Only one example I can give you, blatant violation is, we have a lignite thermal power plant near Bhavnagar in Gujarat, which is Gujarat government power plant. We have a mining, which is by Gujarat government. And both these company, one is a mining company, second is a power plant, lignite with power. both does not have affluent treatment plant, which is required. And Supreme Court in our PSS versus environment made it very clear that such industry should be closed down. In spite of number of letters, in spite of no dispute on that, even now, this industry only got a notice, and even the government has no guts to put on record that this is violation of the Supreme Court order. So that is what is going on. And the last line about dilution, many dilution happen in terms of writing, but many dilution are happening in terms of practice, even in judiciary, to be very honest. Now we have a very fantastic philosophical order you can see in NGT, which get reported. But if you look at minutely in detail, which Anupam mentioned about various dates and what happened during pandemic, you just look at those figures. You said that 19 crore fine has been imposed. This was happened. But if you just look at in very detail, minutely, you realize that ultimately it was talked about it, and ultimately the NGT start diluting it. So that is what I would want to do.
Yeah, just to add a point, we've also been trying to collate some reading material for whoever registers for these workshops. तो अगर आपको इसके बारे में materials और पढ़ने के लिए चाहिए, आप मोहम्मद, maybe you can send the registration link once again. तो उस link, उस ID पे हम वो रोहित भाई से भी या अनुपम से भी लेके थोड़ा पढ़ने के लिए materials हम आपको mail कर सकते हैं. Thank you. I don't see any hands raised, but Professor Srinivasa has been asking a lot of questions. Would you want to come in now, Professor? Okay, maybe he's not there. Do you want to address Neha's question now, Anupam? And then we can go to the next. Okay, Professor Srinivasa has answered.
The replies provided by Rohit Prajapati have been highly demoralizing the morale of the people in India. So, bureaucracy fails, policymakers fail, and press also has become political hands, and the judiciary is also a failure. Then whom to bank upon as far as the common people are concerned? What will happen to India? This is an open question. Every one of us will have to search their hearts.
I think Prabhulla Da is already here. I think he might be one of the people who can respond to a question like that. Mera bhi hai.
Yes, simply stated that we can just put in a kind of framework and put it in our as an ornamental piece in our home. But you have moved the court and got it.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
But Professor is the reality that we have to face it.
Yeah, it is reality. No doubt.
No, the system. Now the system.
Okay, sorry to intervene. It cannot be. I mean, it's best if it's not a conversation. Professor, you've asked your question. Maybe Prabhupada can respond to that right now. If it can be.
One thing. What is the way out? No. The question is, what is the way out for the people of India? As a nationalist, I am asking this question. All of you are nationalists.
But can I speak 1 minute?
Yes, please go ahead, Prabhupada.
The Professor Sahib, this is a question to all. Now we are passing through a very crisis and challenging the authority and the state of affairs. Now the state has become a corporate and a police state. So that you can't get any justice either from the judiciary or the bureaucracy. Everything is controlled by the fascist authorities. So we have to face, we have to fight in emergency. So that situation has come up more than emergency we are facing now. So we have to fight on the people's front. And that is the only alternative to protect the state, constitution and democracy. Then there is no alternative. Secondly, I would like to say about one question. I was in the fact-finding team so far the Azure power plant concern. So we have found it that there is a grant land, and after 1971, the Act, the Assam government has not done justice to the tiller of the land because they have not given a permanent patta. So now what happens now, the government with the land showing that there is no cultivation. What happened in Aju power plant, Mikiribamuni in village? So they have shown knowingly, everybody, the bureaucracy, the deputy commissioner's office, everything, they have with corporates, they show that for the last 10 years there was no cultivation, whereas the crop was there, paddy crop was there, forcefully that was destroyed by bulldozer. So that is the state. Secondly, in Assam, there is a policy in 2019 that the cultivated land cannot be transferred to non-cultivation. But that was also violated in this case. So Assam has to know, just like any full-fledged land policy, even after 1971, those people have got the just temporary patta, they are not given the permanent patta. Even then, those landlords earlier, so grandpa, they have sold this land more than, because there is a limit of 50 bighas. But they have registered for more than 90 bighas. So it is all violation. Even the governor has gone out of way. They are permitted to sell the land. So all these violations are done in the interest of the corporates. Thank you.
रोहित भाई ने भी हाथ उठाया था, आपको कुछ ऐड करना है क्या?
I just wanted to add one line. I had written extensively so people can do search on that, because a lot of people say that you have done great work, and I know that only we had increased the corruption rate of the pollution board and the lawyers for fighting for the corporate. So unfortunately, sometimes we feel guilty. But I'll just make a one statement that we tried to look at as a movement to find out solution in terms of technology and science and judgment. That's unfortunate part of us. And people like us are, in spite of we are using judiciary, we are making this point very clearly that unless we looked at things in a very holistic way, not just look at environment in very narrow sense, bring all dimension like caste dimension, class dimension, trying to connect working class issue, also the pollution inside the factory with the worker, and also the health issue, occupational health issue of the worker, and also outside both, bringing feminist dimension into it. We fail into that. And we always give hope to the people in terms of getting judgment, in terms of getting some small amendment in the act, or bringing something. I think if we will look at things differently beyond this narrow sectarian orthodox framework, then only we can make major changes. Otherwise, we can have a very good judgment, which we can compile and we can say, clap our back and say, we have done great thing. That's all.
Anupam, you want to respond to Neha's question and probably about other things that came up?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So is there a land use policy? Yes, there is a land use policy. You would need, permissions under the Air Act. I mean, I'm just going by the environmental laws for which you will. So one is that these are all areas by de facto, these are areas within the agricultural land. Now, agricultural land conversion is not very easy. And if it is a tribal, if it is a land held by the scheduled caste or the scheduled tribe community, then it is very difficult for the industry to transfer it in their name. So here what happens is that they draw leases with the people. It's not, it's not like land is being bought. These are leases. The second thing is that under the Air Act, Water Act, under the consent to establish, under the consent to operate, all these have to be fulfilled before you set up this thing, oil well or a mine. And unfortunately, they have not, in case of Bagjan, the two areas that I'm talking about, Bagjan and the mining area, they did not fulfill those things. That was very clear when the NGT report came out. The second thing is that about this solar power project, this area, like I said, so Assam has these like grants, land which was being granted by British to sort of other aristocratic families, where there are tax holidays and tax exemptions to cultivate tea and stuff. So this is again like pre-independence. So post-independence, we have Land Ceiling Act. Under the Land Ceiling Act, you cannot sell more than 50 bighas and things like that. Then in 71, they passed the Tenancy Act. So the Tenancy Act ensured that, the people who are actually cultivating the land, they should get the rights. They got those rights in 81 also. They were supposed to get the land titles within the 3 years. The Revenue Department did not do that job. So it's a violation by the Circle Office under which this area falls. And they did not, it's very clear from the various documents that we and this fact-finding committee also led by Prafullada and others who visited Mikir Bamuni, they had accessed this area and they found out that, these laws have been summarily being violated by different aspects, by the different actors in this thing. So that is one thing. Then public consultation for FRA, no, there is obviously it's a democratic process where, the forest right will be determined by the, village level committee, which is at the panchayat level. There will be village level forest committees also. From forest committees, it goes into the village level, it goes into the block level, it goes into the state level. So, so if you're talking about public consultation under FRA, and then the decisions, like in case of community forest rights, the decision to implement various forest management practices, that is again done by the forest. There's a committee for that at the village level. So they are the ones who decide that. So yeah, there is public consultation in FRA also. Now, public consultation for such projects, which department it falls under the ministry in this. So there is a State Environment Impact Assessment Authority. They are the ones who are supposed to look after the public consultation, public hearing and things like that. If it is, since under the EIA process, the old EIA process, we had different categories of industry. Some categories are directly under the ministry, the Union Ministry of Environment and Forest, and there's a National Environment Impact Assessment Authority, or I think that is what the name is, and they are supposed to be the ones who are implementing this public hearing. Also, state pollution control boards also are empowered to hold public consultation and public hearing for certain matters. So state as well as central pollution control board. So I hope I've been able to answer those queries by Neha.
Yeah, just one question and one clarification about the land use policies. So even if they have leases, but the land use cannot change, right? I mean, the land use doesn't go with the ownership. It should go with the use and land cover of that land.
Yeah.
So in spite of that,
could you repeat 1 second? Sorry, could you repeat once more, please?
No,
you were saying?
What I'm trying to say, the land ownership and land uses are two different things. So if it is a forest, either it's a notified forest area or
it's not a forest land. It's not a forest land. It's a land under which land that falls in the eco-sensitive zone, which should ideally fall under the eco-sensitive zone.
Okay.
So eco-sensitive zone is so eco-sensitive zone prohibits any kind of industrial activity. No mining, no quarrying, no oil exploration, no oil drilling, nothing can take place in that. You can also do like very limited construction also for houses.
So then even if there are leases, like you said, the industries can draw leases with the tribals.
Because like I said that eco-sensitive zone for this particular area that we are discussing about, the Bagjan area where the oil blowout took place, where there are oil wells, the eco-sensitive zone has been drawn up incorrectly. Eco-sensitive zone, as in like they had basically, because the oil wells came before the eco-sensitive zone order came from the Supreme Court. So what they did was, while drawing up the eco-sensitive zone, they basically left out all the areas where the oil wells are. So that is completely illegal. And if you're drawing up eco-sensitive zone based on whether or not certain industries are located right next to a wildlife sanctuary or a national park, then itself is a very, very, that's a very problematic thing. You should, because the Supreme Court, before you draw up your own statewide eco-sensitive zone for the respective national park, you should, as per the Supreme Court order, then the area within the 10-kilometer radius should be considered as an eco-sensitive zone till the state government measures and decides. But then that decision-making process should not be that, in some places you would have the eco-sensitive zone going inside the core area of the national park, which is what happened here. That suppose this area is, if you want to sort of like imagine this area, okay, so that, this is the park, and right at the border, right at the edge of the park, there is an oil well. And you are saying that not park has a core area. And then government is saying, Ministry of Environment, Forest and, Supreme Court is saying that along with the park area, there should be a buffer zone around it. Here, what they are doing is, they are saying that there is no buffer zone. Plus, in some areas, the buffer zone is actually, it goes inside the core area. It's kind of an impossibility. So,
right,
it should ideally have been an eco-sensitive zone, but that they have completely sort of violated that entire process and excused or made exceptions of these oil wells, kept them separate while they drew up the eco-sensitive zone for the rest of the park. So that in itself is very illegal. Ideally, these oil wells should be completely demolished and packed off and sealed. So that's what did not happen. That's what I think I was talking about.
Thanks, Anupam. Sorry, Neha, we cannot.
No problem. Yeah, no problem.
I hope that takes care of the thing.
Yeah, we can also send, if you registered and if you want to take the conversation forward, send Anupam's contact email or something, and then you can take the conversation from there. We have with us Pranav, is there with us. Pranav, can you hear us? Pranav?
Is he there?
Yeah, I can see his icon, but शायद उनको सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है. Okay. Because Pranav
Should
had
I
put
call
up
him and tell him that, let me call him?
Yeah, no, he has unmuted. Pranav,
Okay.
Zindabad.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Anupam.
Yeah. Hi.
No, we were just wondering if you are following the conversation or आपको भी कुछ जोड़ना है इसमें, तो that will be really inspiring also. Pranav had put up a very strong fight in the Assam election, openly raising some of these environmental violation issues and against the fascist regime. So it will be really good to hear from him also. Like Meera rightly put, जनता का आदमी है हमारे पास, तो वो भी थोड़ा बोले.
Okay. Hi, thanks. And I managed to. Sorry, I joined in a little bit because we were also actually working on some COVID thing around the space. But though I joined around say 4:50, but I have been following Anupam and the conversation since then, and I guess most of the issues have been well rounded off and things have been discussed, and it's kind of going in a very good way, good direction, where we are getting to know a lot about the nitty-gritties of what's happening around the environment question in Assam. And to add in, I don't know where to start from. But definitely the question of environment comes in, and I would just like to bring in, say, if we're talking about the environment issue, how the model of conservation that's being propagated. Now, Mikir Bamuni, Dibru Soifua, definitely we can see that in all these spaces, somehow capital as in has been the winner, and things are just being decided on the basis of profit that the state and different private players want to make out of it. And on the other hand, there are like more and more areas where you see displacement that's happening, again, in the name of conservation. So you can see that a lot happening in Kaziranga, where I come from, and which was also one of the basic questions in our election manifesto. So, I mean, in both the ways, like when they're talking about environment, mostly it's the common people that's losing out, and which is the case across. And here, like specifically, I would just like to remind everyone about Kaziranga, because it's seen as one of the most successful conservation models in India. And it comes at a cost of huge militarization on one hand, where you are giving like more and more say policing rights to the forest department, and on the other hand you are taking away the civil liberties or the civil rights of people from these areas. I mean, that's one question I feel like which could be added to what Anupam has been already very elaborately speaking about. So number of human rights violations increasing, and you can see the number of different forest battalion forces, like the policing forces within the forest department is increasing. And that is one area I would like to just bring to everyone's notice, and maybe it can be definitely a concern or a question which all of us are raising to carry forward. And definitely if I need to like pitch in on some particular subject area which anyone would like to maybe know, or maybe which I could speak about, I'm definitely open to it. And I won't take much time since we've already been discussing for a very long time. And thanks everyone, thanks. And the fight has to continue. And on the 26th, since there is this call for an all India protest day on the 6-month completion of 6 months of the farmers protest, we are sending out a call in Assam today, like all the farmers organizations here. And we are going to definitely organize and protest and be in solidarity with the farmers and the people of this country, and definitely try to make 26th of this month a successful day, and demand that the farmers bill or the act that has been brought in needs to be repealed. Thank you all, and Jindabad.
Jindabad, Pranabji. So if we have any other questions, if people could raise their hands, we can take one last question for Anupam. Meera, if you want to add, or if you want to just voice out your question that you typed in the chat.
No, so I was just also trying to ask, it's interesting to hear Anupam, of course, and also it's nice Pranab also join. I was also wanting to understand, I mean, we know that now for another term, the BJP is there in Assam and all of that. Not that if there was a different party, things would have been very different, obviously not. But things are definitely more difficult with the BJP on many fronts, including on the environmental front. So I was just wondering what would, but what is also really interesting is whether it is someone like Akhil Gogoi, who's been part of anti-dam movements previously, now as a legislator, or comrades like Pranab, who fought really brave battles and will continue to be on the ground. So will these kinds of energies, what kind of change will these energies make to the public discourse in Assam generally? And also particularly, I had this question about Akhil also, since there is a certain authority, however limited now, with all the other cases that are on him, will he be able to rally around some opposition MLAs to raise some of these issues, make some noise? Do you see any of that possibility? Yeah, I'm done.
Who wants to go first?
Anupam,
yes, Anupam, if you could.
I mean, I definitely see Akhil's coming from this struggle and coming to the assembly as a very big, it's a very big development actually for the people's movement here. And I mean, it's not just Akhil though. I mean, there are a whole bunch of there are 70 different political grassroots organization, grassroots activists. I think it's a call to all of them actually to Akhil's basically election to the legislature is a call to all these 70 to come and start the process of claiming the political space from this traditional and extremely corrupt political formations. So definitely Akhil's is a start, but there are also organizations, I mean, somewhat different from what Akhil thinks or in style of functioning also. And even those organizations also need certain kind of focus and understanding from people who are sort of concerned about Assam. And this is obviously it's a great moment. It's going to be a tough battle. There are forces which were otherwise, at some point of time, they were all oppositional forces have come together because, people like Akhil have now come to the fore. So it's now basically time for other grassroots activists in Assam to emerge from where they are into the into the mainstream politics and then get on with the job of fighting these elections in the next term. And yeah, sure, I mean, with that, if there is that kind of politics coming into being, if it comes to the fore, then we won't, I mean, there won't be any this entire ruling, the government can be easily be can be chased away actually.
Okay, thank you, Anupam. Just checking if there are any other hands which are raised, or else we could close this call. Okay, guys. So I think that there are no more questions. So first of all, I'd like to thank Rohit Bhai, Prafulda, Pranab, Meera for enriching this discussion, and we'll definitely take a look at the chat and also circulate all the links to the participants who have registered. Anupam, thank you very much for taking the time out during this time and sharing such wonderful insights on the environmental movement across from Gujarat to Assam. And we are also aware of a lot of changes that have been done in the last few years and how the whole environmental issue is, or the environment ministry is basically about wrecking the environment rather than protecting it. Ashwati, you want to add anything before we close?
No, it was unexpected, I think, for us also to have such a wide range of audience, honestly. So I think we'll keep continuing such conversations, and it'll be great if all of you can join us in such talks ahead as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.